Teddy joined us into the world pretty unexpected. You can have a plan, and then there's like what actually happened. And I just remember looking at you and heard the charge nurse just like yell at the tech, like, I need those instruments open now.
So once they decided to make the C-section, emergency C-section reality, it wasn't less than 5 minutes and we met him.
Hi, I'm Charlotte. I'm a labor and delivery nurse and new mom. This is my husband, Tyler.
Hello.
And this is our son, Theodore. Teddy joined us into the world pretty unexpectedly about 6 weeks ago. He was 37 weeks gestational age, and he came into this world by emergency cesarean after a failed external cephalic version, or an ECV, which is a procedure that they do to try and turn baby because he was breech, which means head up but down, for majority of our pregnancy. Less than 1% of external cephalic versions end up in emergency cesarean, and that happened to us. So we decided that we thought we would just talk a little bit about our story and post it for anyone that's interested in hearing about it. So we originally planned for a vaginal birth, natural vaginal birth, and we did a lot of preparation to prepare for that. We were also planning on doing it. I wanted to do it without a epidural. I was open to using nitrous oxide or air and gas, and I was like I was really open to everything because I'm a labor and delivery nurse, so like I know that like you can have a plan and then there's like what actually happened. So I was open to everything, but like what we desired was no epidural. And you were fully on board with that too.
Yes.
Heard someone talking about the Bradley method, which is husband-led childbirth classing or classes. Our husband coach, Yeah,
the Bradley method class basically introduced the husband to the whole birthing process, what to expect, how really everything goes in a pregnancy to the actual birth, and what you can do as a husband, and how you can be involved. And it's very, as the male counterpart in that type of class, it's very empowering to see what involvement I can have in a birth.
And so we really enjoyed this class. We were really well prepared, and obviously I'm a labor and delivery nurse, so I knew a lot of the information, but I think it was just obviously brand new information for you, and I wanted you to be as well informed as I was. So hired a doula. We interviewed 2 different doulas and ended up going with a doula that was specialized in like spinning babies. Which ended up being very helpful because we had a breech baby. So
definitely.
Spinning babies is basically it's not just spinning babies like this way, like turning them head down. Spinning babies is also like turning them to get them in the best position to make for a speedy delivery or like an easier delivery. As a labor and delivery nurse, I've had training on spinning babies, but our doulas got a lot of spinning babies and body balancing training, so that was really helpful.
We're really happy we went with the doula we did. Both were great, but the doula we went with was not only helpful for my wife Charlotte, she's also helpful to explain more things to me, and how I could use those certain exercises for spinning babies at home with Charlotte. And I learned a lot. I learned a lot about why we're doing the certain exercises we're doing. At first, I really didn't understand spinning babies. Immediately I thought, what are we trying to spin? How are we spinning these babies in the womb? And it turned out to be helping them explore their space and helping them really get an understanding of what position they should be aiming to go into naturally. So although he was breech, it was still good practice to help them get a little bit more familiar with the space. It could have been potentially a different breech position he was in than what he ended up in, and it wasn't the worst position he could have been in. So
we found out that he was breech pretty early on in the pregnancy, mainly because I had a pretty good inkling that he was breech. I think just with my training, like being aware of everything to look for. From what I've heard from the midwives that I work with, usually first-time moms have no clue that they're breech because they don't know that it feels different than what it should feel like. But what really tipped me off for him suspecting that he was breech was that I only felt kicking like down low, so below my belly button. And at the doctor's appointments, when they would ask me like, oh, do you feel like kicks in your ribs or like up here, and it never, like I might feel like a jab every once in a while above my belly button, but I felt like all the kicking down low.
I think that was like the first kind of inkling of something feels a little bit different than what they're telling us.
And so that was really early on in the pregnancy. Like I feel like I was like 22 or 24 weeks, something in there, where I started being like, I don't think he's head down.
Right.
He was sort of head down. He was more like transverse, leaning towards head down at our 20-week ultrasound. There were a few times
he was that way, yeah.
But then after that, we took a trip to England for a family wedding. It was during that trip that I felt like he went head up. And then after that was like, yep, I don't feel any kicking at all up high. So I felt kicking, but just not up high. We were in the Bradley method classes when I started saying that. So I talked to our instructor, and she suggested that I started doing chiropractic as soon as possible. So I did that, and also then the chiropractor and our doula kind of encouraged me to request a scan to verify baby's position as early as possible, so that we could really establish, because there's things in spinning babies that they won't do unless you have a breech baby. Right. That brings us on to then, once we did verify that he was head down, at our midwife's office, they had like this like little handheld ultrasound scanner, which was really cool because they were able to just like do it in the patient room.
Yeah.
You don't have to schedule an ultrasound. It wasn't like, basically it's not very, sorry, our dogs are over there. That's quiet. Our dog Darwin moaning, and then Georgie's barking. It's not like very high detail. They wouldn't be able to use it to do like an anatomy scan, but it does tell you where the head is, because the head like looks like this big circle. So
it's a general idea, yeah.
Yeah, and every time his head was like up here. Well, right now his head's right here. But
now his head's definitely there.
Yeah, his head's there. And then, so basically we did the chiropractic, which I saw a chiropractor that was trained in the Webster technique. That's what a chiropractor that works on pregnant women should be trained in. It's Webster technique. I am not super familiar with what it is exactly, but I believe that it's not just for like breech babies, that it's working on pregnant women in general. I did lots of spinning babies. It was actually funny, the day after my appointment where we did get like the scan that confirmed he was breech, the next day I went to a training for work for spinning babies. So I learned a ton of spinning babies stuff. And I told the spinning babies instructor, I was like, I just found out my baby was breech. And basically what they told me to do is turn myself upside down as much as possible. I have a picture of me doing the forward leaning inversions, and don't do these at home unless you have had training and like know how to do them safely. I'll insert the picture of me doing these forward leaning inversions, and then we also like set up this bench on the couch.
Exercise bench.
Exercise bench, so I could like kind of lay upside down, like they call it a tilt table. And then
you were on that for about 20 minutes at a time at least.
Yeah, you jiggled me. That sounds like not good, but apparently it's like loosening up the fascia, so jiggling.
Gentle jiggling.
As well as we were doing all these like sideline releases, just things to try and like balance my body and like make sure that all the ligaments are loose and encourage him to flip, which he never did. What else did we try? I did acupuncture.
You did acupuncture. We did the moxibustion, which a little bit of that was like an Eastern medicine kind of practice. We tried that.
Yeah, so I did acupuncture, and then the moxibustion was like putting this thing on my pinky toe and then burning it. Like it didn't burn my skin, but yeah, it was kind of similar to incense. Which I am like not that crunchy or granola at all. Like my sister is. And I told her I was doing all this stuff, and she was like, you're doing this? And
I was
like,
impressed that she was doing it.
Like, I'm willing to try anything to turn this baby. And none of it was successful.
Yeah.
And his head was so prominent, it was like a softball at the top of my belly. So I could always feel it and be like, nope, his head's right there. Like.
And yeah, I mean, as far as those types of things that you're doing, the exercises, there's also you even did the yoga like you're talking about.
Oh yeah, like doing all the body balancing yoga.
Yeah, and I even participated in some of that just to help kind of understand the different exercises she was doing, and it was just great for you and in general to do those types of yoga practice and moves. But dietary, I mean, ate healthy and everything like that. But that was she did all the things.
All the things. We started getting to like 35 weeks, I think is when we made the decision.
I think it was 35 weeks, yeah.
34, 35 weeks. He still hadn't turned, and that is when I started thinking about aversion. I knew that was an option before our doctor even brought it up, just because of what I do for a profession. So, and I explained that to you, and we talked about our options, and originally I didn't have a good feeling about doing it. I just was like, I don't think we're gonna do it. And then because I work at the hospital, I was able to look at the call schedule and see what doctors were on when, and aversion's typically done at 37 weeks. And the day that I turned 37 weeks, I turned on a Friday. So December 23rd ended up being his birthday, but that was when I turned 37 weeks. So that would have been like a good time to do the version.
Yeah.
On that day, my favorite OBGYN was on, and my favorite anesthesiologist. I found out that like my favorite people were going to be on the day I turned 37 weeks. And it just felt like a sign and made me feel really comfortable. And so the reason that we needed an anesthesiologist is because basically they found versions are very painful. So what an external cephalic version is the doctor with an assistant attempts to manually rotate the baby from the outside. Like they push really hard on my belly and on like the abdomen to try and
the baby's cushion, of course. It's not going to harm the baby. You hope in any way. It's just to work, move around the uterus in a way that helps.
Yeah, you saw it when they were doing it, but basically it can be a really painful procedure, and so they found that they are more successful at turning babies, which they say it's got about a 50% success rate. I'm not sure how much more successful it is with the anesthesia, but basically because it is painful, they found that they can push harder and be more successful if the patient it has spinal anesthesia. So we decided to go ahead and do the spinal anesthesia, which basically made me like numb from like here down. And so because I just decided if we were going to do this version, let's just make it try and be as most successful as possible. Yeah. Right. So
right conditions and comfortable as possible too.
Yeah. So we scheduled to see the OBGYN at 36 weeks and have an ultrasound done, confirmed like all of his exact positioning, how much fluid he had, how big he was. And then we had a consultation with the doctor that would be doing the version. And we decided to go ahead and schedule it. And it was scheduled for 9 a.m. on December 23rd. And we had to be at the hospital at 7 a.m.
Yep.
We arrived at the hospital at 7 a.m. I was not allowed to eat or drink anything, including water, after midnight. So we got to the hospital at 7 a.m., which is pretty early for us.
Yeah. We both had to, I remember it was going to be a morning appointment. We both had a work that schedule that day.
The night before too. Like I think I was at work until like 1 a.m. like midnight or 1 a.m. I think I was at work till midnight the night before. So
and we both had planned to work that day.
Yeah.
Most likely not Charlotte.
Yeah, I was not. I was supposed to be on call that afternoon, and I knew I wouldn't be able to show up to that shift. But the day after the version, I was still scheduled to work because it was Christmas Eve, and I was still planning on working. So we got to the hospital. It took us quite a while to get checked in, didn't it?
It did.
And then once we got checked in, they were like, "Oh, wait until someone comes down to escort you up." And I was like, "I'm not waiting. I'm just gonna walk myself up." Because I had my work badge and I knew where I was going.
She knew what she was doing there. She worked there, so she's like, she knew what was going on.
Yeah, I was like, I'm gonna head up. And then our doula joined us because we just decided that we were gonna do some body balancing like doing all of these like forward leaning inversions and like, I don't know, just getting my body ready to, you know, turn this baby. So she came and joined us, which was awesome. And then basically they do the version, at least like the providers that we were with in the hospital that we were at, does it in the OR, which is also where they place the anesthesia. So they prepare me as a patient as if I was going to have the C-section. Even though it's a very low risk, they just want to be like prepared in case it happens.
Yep.
So they wiped me down with chlorhexidine wipes.
And I was scrubbed in, by the way, to go back with her. So
yeah. So you had to put scrubs on so you could come back to the OR. The anesthesiologist approved him coming back. Usually they have him, like the support person, come back like after the anesthesia's placed, but I asked the doctor if he'd be okay with you coming back. Hello. I don't know if you see a little hand, he's waving. So yeah, he said that you could come back. They had me sign like all the consents, and I was working on, you know, flipping around. They monitored him, made sure he was doing good, and he looked great. He was doing really well. Yeah, and then we were also completely unprepared to stay at the hospital. The only thing I brought was a mug, and I brought like an oatmeal for you to eat when we got there, because we were kind of in a rush that morning. So we like brought a bowl and some oatmeal for you to eat.
I needed to have something to eat, especially going back scrubbing in. Yeah. And
then I brought a mug with tea bags so that like after the procedure I'd be able to have a cup of tea. And that's all we brought. I think I brought my laptop so that I could like do some stuff, because I would have to be there for a while after, just for the anesthesia to wear off. Would have been the plan. And I at this point had not packed my hospital bag. It's not like I had a hospital bag sitting at home in case anything happened. Like we were going home. Yeah, it was the plan.
That was go in,
so
and leave.
Yeah, so you put scrubs on to come back, and I was in a hospital gown, and then we headed back. Then we walked back to the OR. I, at this point, had no anesthesia. Oh, they had to start my IV, and I was a hard poke, so we had to bring one of the really good nurses in, and because I work with her, she was like, your veins suck. And I was like, I know, I knew they would, and I'm dehydrated, so because I wasn't allowed to drink anything. So yeah, so I had fluids running, and IV started, and we walked back to the OR. They had me sit at the edge of the OR table and kind of hunch over as if I was going to get an epidural. They have you go into the same position to place the spinal. The difference between epidural and spinal is it's a different space in the back, which I'm not an anesthesiologist, so I'm not like fully aware of that. But also the spinal is just like they put the injection in and all the needles come out. All the needles come out for an epidural too, but with an epidural, they leave a catheter or like a little flexible tube in the back so that they can continue putting medicine in. But with a spinal, they just like put this medicine in to block you, and then everything comes out. So it's just like a one and done procedure. It was pretty painful, but it wasn't as painful as I was expecting, because that was a big part of why I didn't want an epidural, was because I was like terrified of the needle. So I was not looking forward to having to have the spinal done.
I could tell it was painful for you. I was like,
I was just like breathing through it, and you were there, like, and my nurse was standing in front of me while that was being placed. And then so then I laid down, and it's the weirdest feeling your legs go down. Like, I knew they were just like heavy, and they just felt tingly. And I remember just telling them, like, I do not like this feeling. And the anesthesiologist was like, yeah, I've never heard anyone say they like the feeling. And I was like, yeah, but I don't like this feeling at all.
Temporary paralysis of the legs from
it was, and I couldn't move them at all. So the epidural, you can still move your legs a little bit. They feel really heavy, but you can still move them. With a spinal, there was no moving. It was like my body was just like gone from like here down, which was good because I ended up having surgery, so I'm glad I couldn't feel anything. But basically, so we started. So we laid me down, and the charge nurse that I work with was in there, And she was like, are you doing okay? And I was like, yeah. And I was like, I'm on the schedule to be on call later. Are you going to make me call? And or like, what do I need to do? And she was like, yeah, I saw that. I'm not going to make you work. And then our doctor asked, like, who's scrubbing just in case we do need to do an emergency C-section? And the charge nurse said, oh, that'd be me. And so they started the procedure. They laid me down. They put, our charge nurse is so funny. She's like, she calls it the voodoo music, but our doctor likes to put this like relaxing music on.
Yeah, it was very, I'm a very nervous person, especially in those situations. And hearing that music with everything that was going on, it was like, it's calming, but I'm also not calm.
Yeah, the voodoo music was on, as the charge nurse called it. And then they put like a lot of gel on, and they have the ultrasound so that they can see what he's doing. And they started moving him, but I got super nauseous. So I wasn't really aware of what was going on at this point because I had my head turned thinking like with my face basically in a puke bag. And
it's, I will say... And
you were watching my belly, like...
Visually it's very intense. Visually, imagine, just imagine a pregnant woman's stomach and just the whole entire part of that stomach just being moved completely around. And you can almost see the baby inside kind of moving around. And it's very intense. It's not a procedure taken lightly. I would take lightly. It's very, but you have to have the right doctor to do it. And luckily, Charlotte was in good hands with the doctor.
Yeah. And so I know that the next thing while I was nauseous, I felt them push, my IV was in this hand, and I felt them push something because it felt stingy. And so like the nausea went away for just a little bit, and I asked what they pushed, and they said that they pushed ephedrine, which I knew that meant that my blood pressure had tanked. And then I realized that baby's heart rate was down. I don't know how low it went. I know it went below 90, which is not good. We want it to be like 110 or higher. But it did go below 90 because, and that was when I started hearing, they started talking about potentially doing a C-section at that point.
The doctor explained, his heart is, she didn't really mention a lot about Charlotte's heart rate dropping, but she just said the baby's heart rate dropping. Blood pressure dropping. And she said, we're going to wait a little bit, and we're going to see if his pressure goes back up.
Or his, heart rate goes back
up. And if not, we may have to perform an emergency C-section.
And at that point, I just started losing it. I do remember just like crying. Oh, yeah. And I was just like crying, and I heard the charge nurse just like yell at the tech, like, I need those instruments open now. And they all started doing everything. Like, our doctor hadn't officially called the C-section at that point. Like, they were still trying to get baby's heart rate to come back up. But at this point, all the nurses and the techs were starting to do everything that needed to be done.
They needed to be ready.
So they placed my Foley. I felt like, I didn't feel it, but I knew that they were doing something like between my legs. Like, I felt pressure down there. And so I asked if they were putting the Foley in, and they were, which I just remember being like, at some point someone took my underwear off because my underwear was on when I went back to the OR, and they had to put a catheter in. And then they put like the grounding pad on my leg, which I don't remember. I just know that they did it.
And the grounding pad is the...
It's like, it's for the cauterizing thing.
Oh,
and
right.
They have to have like a grounding pad on my leg.
And
they started turning me from side to side, which I know is because they were trying to find like a position that baby would tolerate better to like stabilize him. And so they like fully turned me on my side, and then they turned me back to the other side. And I remember you saying, looking at me, because they were like, oh, heart rate's back up in the 90s, which I knew was not good because I knew that meant that his heart rate had been below 90, which is not good at all. But you thought that they were saying like, oh, it's back in the 90s is a good thing. And I remember you turned to me and you were like, oh, it's back up in the 90s. And
I was so nervous at the time that even though I had no idea what that meant and I had no idea what they were talking about, I took it as an optimistic thing to reassure Charlotte, hey, it's getting better. It's getting better.
I remember looking at you and sobbing, going, that's not high enough.
Yeah, and I'm like, oh, well.
I was like, it's not high enough.
It's going to be okay. And I'm panicking inside at the same time, but I was trying to be, like, kept together for Charlotte, and all these things would happen around me, and I'm just like, hey, we're doing okay.
And
like,
that was, like, then when his heart rate didn't come up above 90, that was when our doctor looked at us and goes, we're going to meet your baby today.
Yeah.
And I was just crying the whole time.
And I was just like,
and you said you looked down at your hand and it was like just shaking.
Yeah,
right?
it was, there was some trembling going on. And I was like, okay,
yeah.
be strong. And, you know, but it wasn't, once they decided to make the C-section, emergency C-section reality, it wasn't less than 5 minutes and we met him.
Yeah. He had, after I found out what his APGARs were, so I was waiting for them to drop the drape because I know that usually once the baby's out, they hold baby up, drop the drape, and show mom and dad the baby. And they never dropped the drape. And there was quite a pause too until he started crying. Later I found out his APGARs were 6 and 7, which is not great. Out of 10, like an APGAR is a score out of 10 that they give babies to kind of score like how well they're doing to adjusting. So the first one, 6, is like that score that he gets at 1 minute of life, and then the next one, 7, is at 5 minutes of life. So the fact that he was at 6 and then a whole 5 minutes of life, that's a long time, and he's still only at 7. He was not doing very good at adjusting to extra uterine life, so they call it. Life outside of the uterus. And so they brought him over to the warmer, and thank God our OR is set up in a way at the hospital I work at, and where we had this procedure done where I could see the warmer. I know like some moms say that when their baby gets taken to the warmer, that depending on how the OR is done, like they can't see it. So I could see it, and I sent Tyler over there immediately. And they started doing like
oxygen
support, respiratory support for him, and he ended up getting CPAP. And he stayed over there for quite a while because they did decide that they were going to admit him to NICU. And
I was over there with him the whole time, exchanging conversation with Charlotte, maybe assuring her he was doing okay. And it looked like he was struggling a little bit, which was nerve-wracking. But he started, getting the color. He's supposed to get the color after coming out. And that's when they decided to transfer him to NICU.
Yeah. And so they had to get the transporter and take him down to NICU, but the transporter was out of oxygen for some reason, so they had to keep him in the warmer and wait until respiratory therapy came to come change out the oxygen, which actually ended up being good because it meant that like he got to stay in the OR. Like they had everything they needed to be able to give him all the support they needed in the OR, so it wasn't it causing him any harm to stay in the OR longer. But it just meant that he basically was in the OR the whole time I was. So actually they moved me onto the bed that I get on to transport back to the room where I would go to recovery. And he was still there. So they actually like hooked me back up on that bed so that I could stay until he was ready to move down to NICU because they didn't want to make me leave while my baby was still there.
Thankfully, we knew before, even if the C-section was a possibility, and once it became a possibility, that I was sick with our son. And
I said that like
and I knew I wanted to.
I always said like if anything ever happens, like I want you to always be with him.
And I knew we both agreed with that right away, that was the plan. And it was just very difficult with the C-section like that, especially emergency C-section where Charlotte can't be with him. And so
I wanted you to be with him because I couldn't imagine just like him being alone down in the NICU. And like thank God for technology. So like I got brought back to my room, and this is where we are so grateful that our doula was there because I would have been all alone in my recovery room because like the nurses have quite a lot of stuff that they're trying to do and can't stay in the room the whole time, and so I would have just been completely alone. And she was there, and like I was able to like FaceTime you, and just even though our doula didn't necessarily like do a whole lot, just having someone there and having their hands on me was really comforting.
Made a difference. Yeah,
it really made a difference. And she made me a cup of tea, which I just remember my nurse was like not happy with me because we tell like patients after C-sections to just like only do ice chips and like little sips of water and like clear liquids. And I was like, no, I want a cup of tea because I have black tea with a splash of milk. And they were like, that's not clear. Like you're gonna make yourself sick. And I was like, no, I'm having a cup of tea. Like I'm not gonna make myself sick. Like I've had water and I wasn't sick, but I just like took it slow. Like I knew what to do.
Yeah.
And I also knew that they gave me a ton of Cesarean, which is a medication to prevent nausea. I knew that they gave me a ton of that back in the OR because I was so nauseous in the OR. So
she was good to go for that.
Yeah. But yeah, and then I was able to FaceTime you while you were down in NICU, which was great, so I could be kept in the loop. But it was really, really hard.
It was very hard.
And I think, I'm not certain, but I'm thinking about it now. I think that they gave me something to, I think the anesthesiologist gave me some sort of meds to like help me calm down. Because I actually, looking back, I was kind of loopy afterwards because I was like telling my nurse, usually we don't get patients up until 8 hours post C-section. And it was like 6 hours after. I think it might have even only been
maybe
3 hours after.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm fine. I can get up. Like, let's get me up. Like, I want to go see my baby. And I was like insistent. I was like, no, we're getting me up. Like, I want to go see my baby. Like, I can get out of bed. And they were just like, no. And everyone, like all the staff, like who are people I work with, were all like, you are ridiculous. Like, you can't get out of bed. You just had major abdominal surgery. And so that's when they rolled down my bed to the NICU. So I was able to be with him. And then I pretty much stayed in the bed down there until I was ready for them to get me up. So they rolled the bed back up. I got up. We took the catheter out. And then I went in a wheelchair back down there. And that was my recovery was, I'll kind of finish up talking about me. We're going to do a separate video, which I will link down below. But we are going to do a separate video talking about our NICU experience because he ended up being in the NICU for 12 days. But my recovery was pretty good. They took the bandaging off. My incision was pretty good. I was not in a lot of pain. I was able to manage all of my pain just with Tylenol and ibuprofen, alternating between those. And I only had to take like one stronger medication, one narcotic, and that was like the first night. And other than that, like they prescribed me medicine to be able to take home for more pain, and I never took a single one. So, that was good. And my pain was pretty good. But I also think that I wasn't able to really focus on it very much because like I was just focused on other stuff because he was down in the NICU.
Yeah.
So yeah, I ended up staying for 3 days. Usually, you can discharge as early as 24 hours after you've given birth for vaginal. And then usually like moms discharge after a C-section 48 hours after they've delivered. But we ended up staying a full 72 hours and not discharging until the 3rd day just because he was still in the NICU, so I didn't want to be discharged
and we weren't sure
while he
how
was
long
still there. But then at 3 days, they couldn't there was no medical reason for them to be able to keep me as a patient. And so they discharged me, and that was kind of the end of my journey. Yeah. We're going to talk about our NICU experience in a different video. But is there anything else you wanted to add to like how that whole experience went for you?
I think plan for the unexpected in your journey, but no matter what journey you go through, enjoy it as much as you can. Even as nerve-wracking as ours was, it was a journey, and we had a wonderful experience in the end. He's here now, and he's healthy, and that's what I think matters in the end, and that he's a happy, healthy boy.
Yeah. I packed your hospital bag at like 36 weeks. That's like usually when we tell people to pack hospital bags, and I just didn't have mine packed.
Yeah.
I am going to do another video talking about like things that were helpful to have at the hospital. Not necessarily what was in my hospital bag because I never packed a hospital bag. But I did end up sending Tyler home to get stuff and bringing it to the hospital. So
lots more stuff.
I'm going to talk about all of that. So If you enjoyed this video, please give a thumbs up down below. That helps YouTube and me know what content you guys like, so I can make more just like it. And if you want more videos about my life as a mom and content related to being a labor and delivery nurse, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of our videos, including our NICU experience video, which will be the next video coming up. So thank you so much for listening to our story. And if you have any questions about external cephalic version, breech babies, spinning babies, anything I talked about, please go ahead and drop a comment down below or send me a message on Instagram. My Instagram is linked in the description down below. I'd be happy to talk to anyone that's experiencing or going through similar things, or if you had this similar experience and you just want to talk to me about it, please feel free to reach out, because I know that it's nice to just know that someone else has gone through the same thing or is going through the same thing that you're going through. So yeah.
Thank you guys.
Thank you. We'll be back again soon. Bye.
Bye.